All right, well, let's get started then. So this session is going to be essentially really fast, and it's going to be a water hose. But the good news is I have a ton of resources for you guys to go read. So if you like reading, there's going to be over 300 pages I'm going to assign you as homework after the session, and I'll point out the links, and they'll also be at the end of the deck. The slide deck's already uploaded to SlideShare. It's also on Tech Communities. It will be updated later today. The slide that's uploaded has more slides because, of course, I can't cover everything in the time we have available. And then actually, if you have a question around a specific category or something, please don't hesitate to reach out. The objectives are really simple. I want to make you feel more confident that you understand some of the techniques that you can use to shift from sort of the traditional adoption for launch approach to more of an ongoing service. And then the second thing that I would really like to get across is that it's not really hard. So a lot of times, it can be defeatist. Like you look at it and you're like, oh man, this organization's really got adoption, but they have all these resources and they have this plan and they have executive engagement and other things that we just don't have. That's okay. There's lots of ways to still have really good adoption and adoption campaigns and techniques while having pretty much no budget. And we've seen it time and time and again. So take heart, I guess, as you go through this and realize a lot of these things you can actually take action on. So my name is Richard Harbridge. I see a lot of familiar faces, but if you've never met me, I'm really friendly. So the biggest takeaway here is my organization, us, we work in adoption all the time. This is a big part of what we do. So if you have questions, et cetera, let's get on a call. Let's do a current state assessment for you and then tailor and have a direct conversation. Beyond that, if you have anything else that you want to know about me, feel free to reach out because, again, I'm an open book. I want to talk about why adoption should be treated like a service instead of the historic model. Again, we work towards a launch for a product or a application or a workload, then we do some adoption activities, then we leave it, and then every couple of years we do it again. And that's changed, obviously, as we move to a services world. So I had more complex slides, but this is probably an easier way to represent it. Typically, if we think of the way we deal with adoption historically, we do a training program, and we just slap training on the end of an engagement. So we're going to launch next week, we're going to do some pre-training, and then we're going to do some post-training, and then that's it. And then maybe a couple months pass, maybe a year even passes or more, and then we eventually go, oh man, we have a new Office application that we're rolling out in the organization. We have a new version of SharePoint or something. We have a new intranet or whatever it is, this workload, so now we're going to do adoption again. And the problem with that in the post-SaaS world, in the post-cloud world, is that these things change. The underpinnings of these solutions change quite frequently. You've seen that with Teams. You've seen that with the integration between these products, where it used to be you'd really want to teach them and help them understand this thing, but now you're realizing, no, you actually need to also know this thing, right, optimally, right? You should, if people want to use Outlook, that's fine, but it's not just about Outlook. Look at all these new integration points, where you can now do more things with Outlook than you could before, modern attachments, so on and so forth. So you want to think about this from a service perspective because that's the only way we can keep up with the demand that our users are going to have, and from an industry perspective, because your competitors are doing that, right? Your competitors are saying, hey, we need, and we see this all the time, we need to accelerate our digital transformation. We need our employees to be more digitally savvy, essentially, and the way we do that is we help them understand the technology and its best uses and so on and so forth. So that's a really important one. The other one that's really critical here is this tragedy of the commons. So we've seen real-world examples where it's really hard to get budget for adoption-related activities in a historic context. But when you start to think of it as a service, as just like a infrastructure, a thing that we have to do as a business to be successful, and you can pitch that the right way, you can get ongoing budget as a continuation, and that allows you to do a lot more over time than you'd be able to do in isolation. And it's critical because things change, so you really want to shift your approach, and you want to be able to tweak it over time. And eventually you get to a point where the business demands more and more adoption services, hopefully from IT, as your IT group becomes more as a service-oriented IT group versus a project-oriented one. Does this make sense so far? Sweet. All right, so let's talk about how we do this then, because that's what we all really came for. What are the techniques? What are the things that are important? So I've talked about this before, but let me iterate this really important concept. A lot of us think of adoption planning at the organizational level, and that's critical. It's really important. And we emphasize a lot of things that we need to do: governance, policy definition. We think of things like roles and responsibilities, committees, who's leading this, and so on and so forth. And that's really critical, but it's not enough, right? It's necessary, but not sufficient. And what we find is the effort is actually here, not at the organizational level. If you think of like dollars and budget, where most of the energy should be spent is driving change here, not here. So let's break that down. What does that mean? It means we flip the triangle upside down and we say, look, this is critical. If it's not done right, we're not stable, right? Which is a nice analogy. So it's really critical, but again, we want to spend a lot of energy up here. So let's talk about this, and I'm going to give you a little checklist, four easy things to start to do that will actually transition you more and more towards working like a service. And for some of you that are really lucky, actually transitioning to adoption as a service or like a service. So organizational checklist number 1, you need to actually have roles. And this has been around for a long time. So the Microsoft team's been really good about this. There's all sorts of community resources as well. There's types of things that we know make organizations more successful with Office 365. Take a community manager. We know that having community manager as a role or something that people do in the organization, that leads to greater success. So if we know that that role is important, the question is, how effectively is that role performing? Do they have resources that they're outputting? Think of guides and materials and things like that people can use so that they're scaling. Do they coordinate? So are they scaling beyond themselves, right? Do we even have any community managers that are coordinated or named or publicized? For communication, is there ways in which we're communicating around this role, right? And that goes the same way for if a community manager doesn't resonate with you, you could take an example of champions. A lot of organizations have champion programs, but here's the biggest problem. Most champion programs, if they have them, are very immature, or if they have them, it's just IT and managers. And we know that peer-to-peer learning is all about non-IT, non-managers, because I don't want to go to my manager and tell them I don't know something, and I don't really want to go to IT because they're too busy, quite frankly, to help me on a lot of those things. So what we want is each of these have different measurements that we can use to determine if they're successful. Now you might be saying, how do I do that? No problem. I'm going to give you a questionnaire that you can just fill out, and then that'll give you an idea of where some of these things fit. The other side to this is policies. So output. So if you have these roles and these committees and these people that are meeting and discussing, or leaders that are focusing on these things, they're going to produce things, policies, guidance, things like that. So I'm going to pick on champions again. So maybe, do you have a coverage and selection plan? Do you have, is that a thing that you have in your organization? Do you know where your champions are? Which areas you have gaps in terms of coverage? Do you have selection? This is important because not everyone should remain as a champion. You should rotate people, because some people, they don't want to be one anymore, and that's great. Some people want to be one, and so we need to be able to continually bring in more people on a continual basis. So what is the selection criteria? How does that process work? Sharing that transparently. Same thing for commitment guides or fact sheets that they can give to their manager, and so on and so forth. And you need to give them stuff, not just responsibilities. That's just like one element, right? We could do the same thing about storage. We could talk about technical things, but I really want to focus on the business side of it, right? So what are all those other things that we need to think about? Think about community management. Think about these other roles that I was talking about here, like departmental leads and HR leads. And again, what kind of policies will help us be more successful over time, and what guidance gaps exist? Now the problem with this is a lot of times we go, great, I just don't know what we don't have, right? We don't know what we don't know. So we're going to cheat a little bit, and in this resource kit, there's a thing called Success Readiness Questionnaire, and it has way too many questions. Like we had to trim it down. Our normal one is like 600 questions, but it has a ton of questions to get you started. So think about it. If you can't answer a question, then you can understand the importance of the question, and so you can decide as an organization, do we want to prioritize making sure we get this answer? So do we have this role? Why not? Maybe we should have a conversation with some other people involved in our business to figure that out. Same thing, we don't have this document, we don't have a financial policy, we don't know how we're doing chargeback over time, IT's taking all the cost of ownership for Office 365, et cetera. These are all things that over time have to change, right? There's no way to scale otherwise. So that's all labeled in there. All right, so moving on, that's the first thing. And we want to do this twice a year at least. So, as a service, what are the things that we're doing at like a heartbeat? The reason you do it at least twice a year is because if you do it yearly, it's too long of a period. Think of the importance of actually fleshing out some of these policy gaps or documentation gaps. Think of the importance of making sure that the roles are updated and transparently shared across your organization. Those things are important enough that you should do it at least twice a year. If you want to do it more frequently, great, good on you. The best thing that can come out of this is a roadmap, right? Kind of like our adoption gaps, and here's what we're planning on doing as a roadmap. The other part to this, and I'm cheating because I don't have time to get into all business objective mapping and stuff, there's a resource I'll share with you that has some suggestions for this, but you want to align with business objectives. What I mean by this is fiscal objectives. So you have, at the very high level of your business, there are fiscal objectives every year that are announced and shared. Work your way down from there and map your workloads, map the technology to those objectives. You can actually do this. You can say Yammer, hopefully not Yammer the technology, but an aspect of Yammer like communities, that actually is going to help us achieve this business objective, which is about connecting and empowering people, which is a broad business objective, which actually translates into, this is the way that we think it has a direct relationship or impact. And here's something that has an indirect relationship and impact. But if you can map that out, especially visually, and there's techniques that, again, are in a resource I'll share with you, then you can actually help executives and other leaders have that ammunition to be able to say, oh, this is important, right? That this workload or this technology or whatever it is important because it helps me achieve things that matter to me, which are these objectives. So we want to do that yearly because it's next to impossible to do that more frequently, to be honest, in most organizations. And then this is the resource that you want to go to get. So there's this is a model. It's a very simple idea: indirect, direct, right? So different types of sizing. So there's objective maps. Instead of this, imagine you have objectives on the top, and then you have solutions or workloads or whatever it is on the left, and you're showing alignment. In this model, what we're showing here is that you need to measure the impact. So even if we have objectives, we still have to figure out, how can we prove, how can we show that there's clear improvements over time in our organization? And there's lots of ways to do this. I'm a big fan of cost modeling things. So most of these examples relate to dollars and cents in some way. And there's actually calculations in this document that explain how to do that. And there's a person in the audience, Sarah, who I'm going to call it, who also has amazing material on this. So definitely follow up on that. All right. So this is one key point. And the key with measurement is we should be doing that on a quarterly basis. Because if we do it on a monthly basis, we found historically it's too frequent. So if you're measuring on a monthly basis, the problem is measurement is about action. What's the call to action from this measurement? It's not about just proving. It's saying, what are we going to do differently based on what we're seeing? So if you're constantly creating action items and you're only doing that monthly, it's really hard to prove that we've moved on some of these action items. So you're always going to feel like we're not just progressing fast enough. So we find that quarterly is a good rhythm. Quarterly, it's pretty reasonable to get some of these action items on. Some get deferred to the next quarter, but then you actually continue to create an action plan that's going to be updated each time you get your new measures and metrics. And measurements, by the way, and I'll come back to this, are really powerful with Adoption Pack and other resources in Microsoft, as well as qualitative things like surveys and user stories and things like that. So the last one here is a center of excellence. So how many people in the audience here have a digital center of excellence of some sort? So a place, a hub where you have training, self-service resources, things like that. You have the ability for people to nominate champions or to ask questions, to ask for mentorship. You have a space that allows people to say, hey, when's the next training for subject X? Around digital, right? So this could be BI. A big, really popular one is BI Center of Excellence. So, where are all our data sources? What are the BI tools that we officially support? Where can I get training? What's formal training that's kind of suggested as good by other people in the organization? What's self-service? All these things, we need a place for all of this, right? We need a space where this is going to grow. So the key thing with the Center of Excellence is you just need one. If you don't have one, you should consider this as a critical part of your organizational guidance and principles. So if you do these things, if you review success readiness, roles and policies, and then you align with business objectives on a yearly basis, and you're doing quarterly measurements that are aligned, again, all this stuff produces tons of material in the Center of Excellence. It amplifies the Center of Excellence. And your Center of Excellence is like your catch, right? It's like a funnel, and the Center of Excellence is where you eventually funnel people towards. Then you have a pretty powerful starting point. So now let's talk about the other side of this, because I said that the group, it's okay, all the slides are available. The group and individual checklist is also really challenging. So how do we do that? I'm doing all right on time. So this is about driving adoption, right? We want to get people to adopt it at a group level and individual level. So one of the ways that we found that works really well for this is creating campaigns. And it makes sense, right? You still need shared commitment towards changing, whether it's an individual or whether it's a group. And so if we're going to do this, we need to create some structure so we can put things together. And this is why this is critical. If you just do training on its own, in isolation, you might get some change, but it's going to be very minor, and it's only the people that are aware of the training, only people that are kind of going to that training. If we just did a contest, it's kind of a flash in the pan. We might get a little bit of interest, and it might amplify some efforts we're doing, but then it's gone very shortly after. But if we structure this as a campaign around a specific business objective, we can really drive organizational change. We can drive change in a department or a division, or we can do it at the whole organizational level. So I'll give an example. Let's say we really think it's important to have people recognize people. That's nothing to do with technology, right? That's just saying that's something that's important to our business. So let's do a People Matters or Recognition Matters type campaign. So it's about that. And what do we do in there? Well, we share tips about praise in Yammer. We share tips about how to use Growbot in Teams to do praise. We share all sorts of technical things in there that help them understand how the technology is helping with this, while also sharing, here's what a good recommendation looks like on LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. And do some contests. So each person who gets praised, will donate X dollars with a cap to charity, and so on and so forth. Now there's social pressure. If I know I should recognize my peers, but if I don't do it now, then I feel really guilty because I'm not even, donating or helping out good causes, and so on and so forth. And so there's all these things. When you start to combine these things together, tips and training and other things together, you get a better result. You get more ROI for the effort that you're putting in. And this doesn't need to be huge. That one maybe is a global campaign example, but it could be a very tailored example around collaboration within this department, R&D group. How do we really collaborate more effectively? So it's collaboration matters, and then we break down different tips and things like that for that scenario. And we test it by doing a couple things. So the tips is important because tips also allow us to involve more people. I can actually just pre-write, there's thousands of tips out there. I can just pre-write a bunch of tips for a user and say, hey, you're one of the people I really want, you're an influencer within this group. I want you to publish this tip. That's all you got to do. Of course they're going to want to, because why? Because they believe in the idea, collaboration matters or people matter or whatever. They're not going to disagree with that. So if they can be a part of that and all they have to do is copy paste or send a little thing on Yammer or wherever it is, great. Then what you do is if you do this with many people, you're going to get more involvement, and then you summarize those, maybe weekly on the intranet homepage or something like that as a larger update, so people who aren't aware of it go, oh, I didn't know there was a bunch of other tips around subject X, discovering information, working and finding content, whatever it is that your weekly theme is. So then there's more guidance again in the white paper I'll share, the Office365campaigns.com one. But the other thing on the contest is a lot of people don't know where to start. So we've given you a ton. There's actually a whole lot in the resource that again is linked here that allows you to basically start a campaign, put a bunch of contests in, and see which ones work. And a reward structure doesn't have to be iPads and things like that. It can be lunch with an executive. So there's lots of ways to make this very cost effective as well. Training, I'm going to take a time out for training. This drives me nuts. So your training should be simple. It should not be module 1, 2, 3, 4, we have a 2-hour training session, etc. So that's number one, point number one. You should do your training frequently. You shouldn't do it one time because people aren't always available. So why not do it multiple times? Especially, it should be probably remote first. Now you could do other trainings, in person, etc. You should do a blend. But if you do remote, it's very cost effective. We can rotate and do the training again and again, and we can learn and dynamically adjust the training much easier. What's more, if it's remote, you can actually have high levels of interactivity, and this is critical. So when you're doing your training, think of how do we inject interactivity so people aren't just passively learning. How do we do that? I'll give you 2 examples. You could use OneNote. You can have thousands and thousands of people on a single OneNote document at the same time co-authoring and learning all sorts of things. So you put a OneNote together that's got some of your key messages and stuff like that, and you literally share it with everyone on the Skype for Business meeting or whatever it is you're using to orchestrate the training, and then literally have you all co-editing and authoring at the same time with maybe some simple exercises. And you're not really going to track if everyone does it, but at least now there's a sense of, oh wow, that we're getting involved. Or the app launcher. The new modern app launcher is a great example of this. Get people to unpin stuff, and then as you go through each of these things you're training them on, pin them back. And then that way that app launcher now is meaningful to them, what's inside of that. There's lots of ways to add interactivity. Please do it and stop being lazy trainers out there. All right, the next one here is communication. So when we're doing these campaigns, there is a lot of work in pre-planning, but it's not an unbelievable amount. So in an organization that was over 100,000 users when we did this, we needed only 5 business days to build all these materials that we needed to make the campaign a success. 1 resource, 5 business days, that's all it takes. So it doesn't have to be, now, we have other campaigns where there's like 20 resources and a lot more effort, but for the most part, you can do these things at a very low cost, even on your own if you're really ambitious enough, and just create the materials and go and say, here's what my idea is, and this is why I think we should go do it. And you'd be surprised at how quickly the dollars start to run in. Last one, if we do a campaign, because it's a period of time, we can also show what was our baseline before, how is it doing during, and we can show after, especially 2 months or 60 days or whatever number of days afterwards as well. So this is really important because when we measure, we can use things like the adoption pack, and we can actually see how it's being used. So I wanted to give one quick example because we don't have a lot of time. In the adoption pack, if you haven't used it, there's all sorts of really rich reporting, and there's more that you can do with this. Here's one of my favorite ones. This shows OneDrive for Business accounts owner versus contributed by, and this is SharePoint. So what we're seeing here is the blue line represents essentially content that's been shared in terms of total volume, and the black line represents content that's just owned, which means it's just me putting it there and me working on it. This is important. OneDrive should look something like this, hopefully a little bit better actually, where the black line's higher, right, and at scale. And SharePoint should look like this. Why? Because SharePoint's where we share content, and OneDrive's where we work on our content, and sometimes share it if we own the content and there's not another place or it's a temporary spot. Why we shouldn't see this keep increasing, and a lot of organizations might see this increase, means that maybe people are using OneDrive in a way that isn't the optimal use, and they should get more training exposure or supportive exposure or tips and tricks or whatever around Teams and SharePoint and other places that cause the content to be shared within a group instead of the context of an individual. Make sense? So there's lots of ways to interpret this. Unfortunately, it's not always intuitive, but hopefully like this gives you an idea that there is value here. You just have to figure out how to unlock it. And if you align that over your campaign and you say, here's what we're going to measure before, and now we're going to do a campaign around getting people to understand SharePoint with a better term, then one of the measurements we could use is that to see if we see a transition towards people sharing more in that space. This is also really important because it creates more content for your Center of Excellence. If you're doing campaigns and you're doing tips and tricks and training and so on and so forth, then this place is alive and vibrant, or at least it's injected with activity every few months when you do your next campaign. And this is a really, really powerful thing because now, all of a sudden, all this effort creates a funnel that drives people towards the Center of Excellence, which means they know that there's a safe landing spot where they can find everything that they need, where they can get the help that they need, where eventually you can even look at the usage here and a bunch of other things to figure out who your champion prospects are. There's all sorts of things that you can do once you have this going. So this checklist is actually pretty straightforward. Campaigns is the key concept, and we want to define those and execute them, and then repeat, essentially, which drives all the things that we want. So with that, I'm going to just summarize everything we've said. We review success readiness twice a year at least. We align with business objectives at least yearly. We measure and review quarterly. We plan and execute campaigns as frequently as possible. Typically, it's a monthly at least. And then we do improve digital Center of Excellence as a result of these activities. And if you're doing that, you are effectively working like a service, even if you're still doing projects and you're doing the historic method, which means it's that much easier in the future when things accelerate even more, trust me, they will, that you're able to adjust as an IT department or a communications group or wherever it is that this is going to reside in the short term. So with that, resources that I highlighted, this is the adoption white paper that has how to structure those campaigns. The resources kit has the sample contests, sample surveys, stuff like that, as well as that success readiness questionnaire. And then the metrics one has examples of how to do measurements. And we have some other stuff coming, but I have an 11-month-old and I'm a little bit behind. So our team is working on publishing some other awesome resources that will complement these. And they'll be linked to them, so if you get them, we'll make sure that you're updated on those updates. Okay, so that is our session. The beauty is, thank you. The next session is actually canceled, so you guys can stay as long as you want with questions and answers. And I'm willing to sit here and talk, but for sure, if you've got a session you want to run to, don't feel like it's bad to leave. So thank you guys so much, and my business cards and stuff are here. And if there's anything else I can do, I can help. Yep. So the slide deck is on SlideShare here, as well as on Tech Communities. You should use Tech Communities, it's great, as well as the Ignite app will have it.
Okay.
Yep.
You'll make that available on the Ignite?
It is technically available. I don't know if they've uploaded it yet. I just need to update. There's like 2 minor changes to the slides that will also go through. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Good talk. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think I connected with you on LinkedIn yesterday.
Any questions? Yeah, because I'll repeat them for everyone else. Yeah.
large company.
Yep.
When you go in and help them to do this, what's a typical, like how long does it take?
So the strategies. So the question was for a larger company. How long does this typically take to kind of get going and make happen? And what we find is that there's two parts to this, right? One is just coming up with what are our gaps, and that takes very little time. So it's really just getting the right people in a room, and even if you don't have the right people in a room, getting some people in a room to make some progress towards that. That's typically like a week. It doesn't take long. Then there's recommendations. Now we know there's a bunch of gaps. So then that takes typically like 2 weeks to process to get the right people aware of like where the gaps are. And then in a perfect world, we then take action from there to start creating our first campaigns and doing that sort of thing. And then those are typically your first campaign, you want to make 25 business days or so. So like a 1 month campaign, pick a subject and execute that, whether it's with a division or whether it's with the whole organizations, again, depending on who the stakeholders involved are and where we are. Yeah, so you always want support for that first pilot, whether it's us or another partner or somebody else, somebody to help you with that. And then once you've executed that first one, at that point, it'll just start to accelerate because everyone wants to get involved. There's this big hubbub because it always is successful. And so when you have that, you finally get budget and you get interest from business groups, not even just from IT, from business groups to like, we want more of this. Like, this was great, we want more. And so then you start to get opportunity to set up your timelines. But that first part, it's really a week and then typically about 2 weeks of prep. And then depending, if it's an org campaign, obviously there's more involvement, but yeah. So these aren't huge timelines for sure. We're talking about like months, not like quarters or something like that.
One more.
Yeah.
Where are you with a company that's going to Pro Plus? When's the best time to engage with them? You know, they're thinking about doing it. They're deploying.
Yeah.
They've started deploying. When's the best time?
Sooner is always better than later. So when should you start to do this or engage around this stuff? Sooner is always better than later. So because if there's not clear opportunity, then at least you've had the conversation, and then with an expert like us or whoever, they can tell you, here's when you should start to think about this more meaningfully. Yeah.